Is True presents Robert Anton Wilson Explains Everything, or Old Bob Exposes His Ignorance. Session 4, Politics and Conspiracy Theory.
You fearlessly adopted some of the most bizarre positions on almost every topic. So
I have?
Well,
see, I thought all my positions were perfect common sense and the rest of the world was weird.
Be that as it may, how have you settled on libertarianism as being closest to something that is meaningful for you?
Well, I will quote three American presidents, the first three. George Washington said, "Government is not reason, it is not persuasion, it is force. Like fire, it is a treacherous servant and a dangerous master." And I think any contemplation of political history will show that government seldom remains a treacherous servant. It very rapidly becomes a dangerous master. John Adams said, "Power, wherever invested, whether in a single monarch, an oligarchy, or the majority of a democratic parliament, is always despotic, arbitrary, diabolical, and in every respect dangerous." He was the second president. The third president, Thomas Jefferson, said, "The best government is the least government." So you see, there's nothing really radical or original about my thinking. I got the first three presidents on my side.
So if these aphorisms are true, then why not anarchy?
Why not indeed? Henry David Thoreau pointed out, when Jefferson said the best government is the least government, the logical deduction is the least government is no government at all, so why don't we try that? Jefferson had similar sentiments at least once. In one of his letters, he wrote, "If the democratic experiment fails," I'm paraphrasing, of course, my memory isn't letter perfect, "if the democratic experiment fails, I don't think we should move in the direction of European monarchism. We should rather see how well we can adopt the anarchism of our native Indian population." So Jefferson was not too hostile to anarchy. Ralph Waldo Emerson pointed out that during the Revolutionary War, Massachusetts was an anarchy. There was no government at all. And yet everybody was acting cooperatively and friendly and neighborly fashion to kill as many Englishmen as they could. But it was a total anarchy. There was no government at all. And yet people weren't robbing one another's houses or raping one another's women or anything like that. No, I got Emerson on my side, too. My God, then there's Friedrich Nietzsche. The state, everything it has stolen. It even bites with stolen teeth.
Can you explain the term SOG?
SOG stands for Tsarist Occupation Government, which is what we've got now. They're in charge of the piss police and all sorts of other spies, snoops, and informers. Well, no European can believe it. The only thing you can compare to the United States today is the world you find in the great Russian novels of the 19th century under the last czars. The voters of California, in their wisdom and charity, a couple of years ago voted to legalize marijuana for medical use in a variety of specified cases, including cancer, AIDS, muscular sclerosis, post-polio syndrome, and two or three others. And this came about because of the initiative process, which was introduced at the end of the 19th century, when a lot of pretty smart people began to realize that the federal government was no longer representing the people, it was representing the millionaire class only. And as an attempt to make the system more democratic, the initiative was introduced. It was declared constitutional by the Supreme Court, and it's been upheld by the Supreme Court repeatedly. And through the initiative process, the people can pass their own laws and counteract the influence that big money has on politicians. So we got this wonderful initiative process that looked like it was going to restore democracy. Then we passed an initiative that the SOG didn't like, the Tsarist Occupation Government in Washington. So what did they do? Clinton comes on television and announces, "Fuck you, you can't make your own laws. We make the laws, you just obey them." And the whole initiative process has been completely abolished after 100 years of making steps. And most of the states that have the initiative, really progressive changes have come about through the initiative. Now the initiative doesn't mean anything anymore. The president can just cancel it and appoint a czar to make sure we got to obey the czarist rules and we can't make our own laws anymore. power ever vested, just to be diabolical and in every respect dangerous, to quote John Adams, or it is a fearful master, to quote George Washington again. Peter McWilliams, who died recently because they took away his pot, he was a cancer and AIDS patient who, due to chemotherapy, spent most of his time vomiting until he discovered that marijuana controlled the vomiting. And under Proposition 215, the initiative passed by the voters of California, he had a legal right to the marijuana. So he started growing marijuana plants in his yard, and he was growing quite a few of them because he wanted to distribute it to other sufferers from those diseases. And he also wanted to find which strains were best for which purposes, which are best for controlling nausea, which was his problem, which are best for controlling pain, which is the problem with a lot of people, with muscular sclerosis and post-polio, etc. They busted him, and the judge forbade Pete Williams' lawyer to say in court that the voters of California had voted to give him the right to use marijuana to treat his illness. They couldn't even mention that to the jury. If the jury didn't know it, they didn't find it out in the courtroom. That was not considered a legitimate defense. The people have no rights anymore. The SOG decides for us. We just obey. The judge had to meditate a long time on the sentence because Peter was going to die in a year or two anyway, so any sentence would amount to a death sentence. But judges have to do things according to the rules. We had to read parole reports and all sorts of reports, this and that, and meditate deeply on how many years he was going to give this guy in prison, in a prison hospital, and in the 1 or 2 years he had left of life. And during that time, while the judge was meditating, he forbade Peter to use the marijuana anymore to control the nausea. So Peter went back to vomiting all day long in the bathroom, and he finally choked on his own vomit and died. And when I tell people we got a czarist government, they look at me like I'm a little bit peculiar. All they got to do is read a novel by Dostoevsky or Turgenev, and they'll see the government we've got right now is the government the Russians had in the 19th century.
Well, what about, like, for example, the fact that our government is elected and the czars were never elected? Seems like a pretty big difference.
Yeah, it sure does, until you look at the matter a little more closely. Jim Hightower, who was a Democratic politician until a few years ago, now he's in the Green Party. He has published a list of about 30 corporations that have each donated $500,000 to both Gore and Bush. So both Gore and Bush owe about $30 million to big corporations before they get elected. This is to finance their campaigns. It costs well over $100 million to run a campaign for president now. I don't know how much. It was $100 million in the 80s. By now it's probably up to $300 million. Anyway, a large part of this comes from all the major corporations. So whichever one of them gets elected,